Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to the Trinity Channel. There are lots of networks around the world, and there is a trend in ignoring some of the most difficult problems in the world. Some might report, but there is a horrible tendency to whitewash a lot of what's going on. And we don't want to do that here. We want to face the difficulties of the world head on. And to help us with that tonight, we'll have a couple of special guests. At first, we're going to have a Christian sister from Denmark to talk about the situation among Christian and Muslim immigrants over there. And then in a little while, we'll have on Dr. Bill Warner, who runs the Center for the Study of Political Islam, to discuss a bit of the situation. But we wanted to bring our sister Jomana on right now. Jomana, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hi. Now, I saw a clip of you pretty recently, and the clip was titled "Christian Arabs Attacked in Denmark by Muslims," in case anyone wants to search for that. Christian Arabs attacked in Denmark by Muslims. Now, we want to talk a little bit about that situation, but I was hoping we could get a little of your background. Did you grow up in Denmark or come from somewhere else? What's your background?
I was born in Denmark, and I have Lebanese parents. I grew up in a place where there was a majority of Muslims. I can tell you about what I've experienced in that place. It's actually a ghetto. It's called Gellerup. As a child, what I've experienced, children my age used to call me an infidel. And they questioned me if my dad and brothers were circumcised. And at that age, I really didn't know what circumcision is. I was only 8 years old. I was bullied in preschool because I ate pork. My older brother used to get hit in the playground because he used to wear a cross around his neck. That was my experience in my childhood. Because of my Christian faith, that was the kind of bullying I had to go through.
Just to clarify, you're born and raised in Denmark. So you're born and raised in Europe, but it's a predominantly Muslim area of Denmark, and you're treated like this. You're not treated as one amongst equals.
Exactly. I'm not treated as a white Danish girl. I'm treated as an Arab Christian infidel from Muslims. That's how I'm treated when I'm around, when I'm in places where there's majority of Muslims.
And so. That's when you were a child. Did things get better when you grew up?
Not at all. When I grew up, I was around 18 years old when I decided to move to the capital, which is Copenhagen, and I got an apartment in another place where there is a majority of Muslims, and the bullying changed to harassment. And I started just going out from my home because I wasn't fully covered. I could just get a remark or a sexual remark, or people call me a whore just because I wasn't fully covered. That's the kind of remarks I used to get. Um, and men around 55 years old could come and question me about, ask me one time again, and if I say no again, then I'm called a whore, and I'm pretty sure they can see my cross. Mm-hmm. So because I wear it always on.
So
well, and this is kind of things that I've experienced. Mm-hmm. But like from on the 3rd of August, where you saw the clip, the one that I've sent you. On the 3rd of August, I was sitting in my car. 7 men surrounded the car. One of them put his foot on the front bumper of my car. I questioned him what was wrong, and what he answered me was, "Do you think I'm looking at you, you ugly bitch? Look at what you have on, you whore." I was very shocked from the answer that he gave me. After that, he saw my cross, and when he saw my cross, he called me with a large sexual remark, and he kept on talking to me like 5 minutes, really insulting me, and then he ended the whole thing telling me, "Do you know what we do with Christians like you? You get stoned to death." I was very, very scared. I've never ever experienced someone giving me a death threat like that. I've heard about people getting stoned in Iran or in Afghanistan, but I've never ever heard someone telling me that I have to get stoned because of my Christian faith. After that, I drove away from the place. I called the police, and they came after 30 minutes. The man that gave me this death threat had the chance to run away. While I was talking to the cops, a car drove right next to us while we were talking, and the cops were talking, and they took a video of me and the number of my car number plates of my car. And I went and confronted the person, and the police just told them that they had to drive away, which they did. And then the police drove behind me back home because I was really scared. And then I decided to go to the media and tell them what happened with me anonymously. And after 2 days, I got an appointment with them after 2 days. While I was driving, a black van drove after me. They were honking, and they drove in very, very high speed. And then they changed to the next track. And when I looked right next to me, it was the same man that took a video of me that day I got my death threat by getting stoned. So I tried to vanish from the place. It was very horrifying, just like knowing someone is after me and following me by a big black van. After that, when I was done with my interview, I drove back home, packed some of my stuff, and went to my friend's house to stay over there because I was really scared. I couldn't be home anymore. I knew someone is following me. They have a video of me, and they know who I am. So I stayed there, and after like around 1 week, I decided to go back home to get some of my clothes. Because I needed to have some changing clothes and stuff like that. And I decided to go back home at like 3 at night so that no one would recognize my car or recognize me. So while I was driving back home, the man that gave me that death threat saw me from a long distance. So what he did, he grabbed a glass bottle and threw it after me while I was driving back home. And that was really, really scary. And then a lot of articles started, people started to contact me, and articles was written about me in a religion.dk, and a lot of big media, newspapers, and stuff like that. And the media called me, and it's a mainstream media called TV2 News, so that I could share my story and tell them what have happened. And when I did that, surprisingly, I told my story and it came on the media. So what happened afterwards, because they told them what my Facebook account is, a lot of people started sending me messages about that they want to behead me, they want to rape me and kill me at the same place, they want to hang me, just because I said what I have went through as a Christian. And actually I didn't even say directly that it was Muslims that have done that. What I said in the video that you also saw, that I also have Muslim friends, they would never ever dare to say something like that about me, or tell me those kind of remarks. But people started writing to me that I want to demonize Islam, and I'm trying to make a split between two big religions, and I'm trying to do problems, and I'm lying, and that's not true. And also some people said that it's my problem, and it's my fault that I was in Naples with shorts on, and they gave me they blamed me for what have happened. And people started they copied my pictures, shared it on Facebook groups, and my name was shared on Muslim groups and Arab groups. People were questioning on where I was. They wanted to find me. And when that was happening, I was really scared. My own friend was scared. Then I had to move to a crisis shelter because I felt that people are after me. Then I started getting messages that people are after me from Berlin, from Jutland, from Copenhagen, and it didn't even end here. I started getting phone calls about people wants to kill me, and they're after me. They know who my parents are, and they wanted to do pornographic pictures of me, fake pictures of me. That's what I've experienced, actually. And that didn't even stop over there, because I was once in town where two girls came up to me and pushed me and told me that they want to hit me until I'm dead. And yeah, that's what I've experienced after coming on the mainstream media.
Now, Jomana, so this was in Copenhagen?
Yes.
So this is the capital of a major Western nation, and just to recap, your crime was that when someone surrounded your car and threatened you, you told police. And then, as you pointed out, I saw the video clip where you were interviewed, and you're pointing out that you have Muslim friends who would never do this. So you are drawing a distinction between, the people who are doing this and your Muslim friends, and yet now you have to go into hiding for your life in a European nation.
Exactly. Well, as you said, I said that I have Muslim friends that would never ever dare to tell me those kind of stuff. And I do know that there are Muslims that wouldn't even say those kind of things. So I'm not blaming all the Muslims for what have happened to me in Naples or the place where I've got my death threats. I'm not doing that, but that's what the people are trying to put in my mouth as if I've said that. And that's called guilty by association, I guess. But I have never ever said that it's all the Muslims that have done that to me.
Now this should be disturbing to everyone, but it's especially disturbing to Americans because there seems to be two different mentalities here in Europe and America. The general theory in America is called the melting pot. It's that people come from all different cultures around the world and sort of get melted into one unique culture, because people are bringing things from everywhere else, but it all comes together as one culture. It doesn't always work out like that, but that's the goal is for everyone to come together as one culture. Whereas now in Europe, the goal is multiculturalism, where if you come to Europe from a different culture, you don't adopt a new culture. You don't melt. You don't sort of melt together with everyone else to form one culture. You maintain the culture of the place where you came from, and you don't change it. And a lot of European leaders would actually regard it as bad if you change your culture. You would be adopting a European culture, and they have such contempt nowadays. I'm talking about Europeans and European leaders, who many of whom have such contempt for their own culture that they would regard it as bad for someone else to come and adopt European culture. And so something that really sounds good. Hey, wouldn't it be great if lots of different cultures come together and maintain their own cultures while still living together in harmony? That sounds good. The problem is that some people come from cultures where you oppress everyone who disagrees with you, where you target and bully anyone you don't like. And if they're not required to change, then you're going to end up very rapidly with a segregated society. There will be different cultures, but they will be separated. They will be segregated. They won't be able to integrate. And it seems like that's what's happening. And I don't know, what do you think? Is that what's going on?
Well, you just described it perfectly. That's exactly what's happening in Denmark. People or the immigrants, they're making their own like kind of a segregated place, and they're not integrating with the Danes. They're just doing like they are practicing whatever they want to practice. Like if you go to the places like, as I call them, the ghettos, you see everything like as if you're not even in Denmark. Really, like they don't want, like even the people, they don't want to be a part of the or talk with the Danes, or they don't want to be associated with the Danish people, and that's a big problem. I do not at all consider multiculturalism a good idea at all, because as you said, they are in those places. They're trying to suppress those people that are not like them. For example, I am a Christian, and for a Muslim, I'm not as worthy as him, because that's what is written in his Quran, that I am not as good as him. So that then they can practice whatever they want to practice, and it only goes like I am a kind of a minority when I'm in that kind of place, mm-hmm. where the majority of Muslims are, and then I can get bullied or harassed, and they have their full right to do that based on the Quran, actually.
Mm-hmm. And that is, and you're absolutely correct. And for anyone who's thinking that you're making this up, chapter 98, verse 6 of the Quran says that Christians, Jews, and polytheists are the worst of creatures. And as you're pointed out, there are Muslims who don't pay much attention to that. There are Muslims who don't try to oppress people. But the way,
thank God for that.
But the way the Islamic teachings seem to work is that even though there are plenty of Muslims who live far better lives than a lot of what we would see in the Quran, it seems to just increase the percentages. So even though there are plenty of Muslims who don't want to hurt or oppress anyone, it's a greater percentage of Muslims who would like to oppress others than of non-Muslims, of Christians or something like that. And so what you end up with is in an area where, and by the way, it's sort of a similar pattern whether you go to the Middle East or whether you go to Denmark. If you have an area with thousands of Muslims and non-Muslim groups are the minority, you don't need every Muslim to go around oppressing people. You just need some, and can make that a very, very difficult place to live. Because who's going to stand against them? If you stand against them, you're a target. If you're a Christian and you object or you talk to the police, you are now a target. Now you have to go into hiding. But also, if you're a Muslim and you speak out, they're going to target you. They're going to say that you're one of them. And by the way, that's a Quranic idea too. Chapter 5, verse 51 commands Muslims not to be friends with Jews and Christians. And so, if a Muslim is friends with a Jew or a Christian and is saying, hey, leave these Jews and Christians alone, it's very easy for Muslims to then turn that Muslim into a target and say, how dare you? You're going against the Quran and siding with the Christians and not with your own people. And then they're a target. And so it just ends up with this huge spiral with no real way out. And it just seems that European leaders are helping this process along rather than taking a stand. I did want to ask, because you've shared your experience, but I also know that you live over there, so you know many other people, you know other Christians, and you have a page on Facebook. I was wondering if you could share some the experiences of other people. Is it similar to yours, or is it better?
Well, as I said, when I came on the mainstream media, TV2 News, although I got a lot of death threats from people, I also got a lot of messages from Christians. They were writing to me about what they have been going through, how they are harassed. I got messages from parents telling me about how their kids are being spit on, they're being hit in the playground, and I am not surprised at all.
And by the way, this is in Europe, right? This is in Europe where this is going on.
Yes, this is in Europe. People that have tried to reach out, they are being anonymous. They're afraid to come out and speak and tell about their experiences. I've got a school letter where the Muslims kids, like that was like 8-9-year-old kids, they don't want to play with the Danish and the Christians or the whites because they are infidels for them. And now when I think about this kind of situation, that an 8-year-old kid doesn't want to play with someone his age just because he's an infidel, well, that means that his own parents or someone is telling him that this Christian is different than you, do not play with him because it's haram or whatever they want to tell those kids. That's the parents' problem. Kids do not know what an infidel is when they are 7 or 8 years old. I do not believe that kids would know what it is if not older people have told them that. Other things was there's a Christian woman that told me about that men came up to her and told her that she should wear a hijab on. I've had in 1 month and a half, I got over 40 messages from Christians that are being harassed, they are being bullied, they are getting sexual remarks, they're being assaulted, sexually assaulted, and that was only in 1 month and a half. After that, I started getting messages from ex-Muslims, converts who converted to Christianity, I had live interviews face to face with them. I had an interview with a Turkish man telling me that whenever he left Islam and converted to Christianity, his own mom came after him with a knife. She wanted to kill him. And I've also had another interview with a Pakistani man telling me he lived in the refugee camps. He told me that because he tried to hide that he was an ex-Muslim, but whenever they found out about that, the other Muslims around him, the Pakistani Muslims, they tried to attack him and harass him. Then he had to move from a place to place, from a refugee camp to another place. And this is all going on, and I feel like the politicians and the political correct people, they're trying to hide this from us. They don't want to say that this minority of immigrants are harassing another minority, which are Christians. They just want to hide the truth from us. That's what's happening here in a democratic country like Denmark. They don't even want to say what's happening with the Christians. Whenever someone speaks out, they make as if he's just it's only one issue, and this doesn't really happen. But I can tell you that also a preacher called Masood, he's an ex-Muslim, he's a priest now, he also was harassed, and they tried to ruin his car a couple of times, so he had to move away from the place he used to live in. It's called Onsevåldsmosen. Another Christian priest, 2 days ago, he moved from the whole country, Denmark. He moved to Germany because he was getting harassed too. And from 4 days ago, a church had to lock newly their doors while they're preaching because people are going inside and robbing stuff and personal belongings of people, like mobile phones, and they also found a Bible in the garbage. I wonder who those people are that are doing those things. So now that church has to close the doors while they're preaching. So that's what's happening in Denmark. Another thing is, another preacher, her name is Helle, she contacted me and told me that she is hiding. She have hid 4 ex-Muslims in her home because they were getting harassed, they were getting bullied, and people were after them just because they converted from Christianity to Islam. And it doesn't even end over here. 6th of March 2014, and a guy from Afghanistan who is 48 years old, he's an ex-Muslim. He was attacked by a knife in a refugee camp. There's a lot of things that's happening, and I can keep on telling you names until tomorrow, and I can assure you that we are not just one issue. This is a big problem happening here in Denmark, and the political correct people are trying to just say that it's not a big deal and it's not a big problem. And there was a hearing from around 3 weeks ago about the persecuted Christians, where some of the political correct priests tried to say that for example, Iraq, Christians should have a good friendship with the Muslims, and they have to come good together and try to deal their own problems together. And I don't believe that this is a good idea because they're already persecuted from Muslims. And I feel that some of the political correct priests, they're trying to, I don't know, they don't want to ruin their good dialogue with the imams, for example, so that's why it has to go, unfortunately, has to go on us Christians. It's going to be our problems. We're the ones persecuted. They don't want to talk about those problems because they don't want to ruin their dialogues with the imams and go to the mosques and talk with those imams.
Jomana, it's a similar situation here in the United States. It's not nearly as bad as it is in certain places of Europe, but there's something similar here in that no matter what's going on in the world, no matter what's going on with ISIS, no matter how badly Christians or Yazidis or other groups are being persecuted, the tendency among many church leaders is to remain silent, because if you speak out and say there's a problem, you'll immediately be accused of being a racist and a bigot and a hate monger. But over here at least it will just be name calling, right? Over here, the worst thing you almost ever have to worry about if you speak out against Islam is being called names, being called a hate monger, a bigot, things like that. If you're like me, you get death threats and so on. But most people wouldn't even have to deal with that little bit. Whereas in Europe, you actually have to go into hiding. And so you're referring to church leaders over there, and they don't want to ruin their dialogue, but they can't. as soon as they speak out, as soon as someone says, hey, there's a problem here, there are groups of Muslims who are harassing Christians, forcing them out of their homes, that person would be labeled a racist and a bigot and a hate monger and become a target and have his property destroyed, and be forced out because no one wants a church leader who's causing problems. But it's the same thing with politicians. If a politician says, we've got a problem here, we have to do something about it, now this politician is a racist and a bigot and a hate monger, and the situation just seems to be in an area once you have a Muslim majority, well, some of those Muslims, not all, but some of them are going to go around harassing and persecuting Christians, and those Christians aren't going to want to stay there, they're going to want to leave, so then the percentage of Muslims increases, and then as it increases, the persecution increases, until, the goal seems to be just completely Islamic areas. And why that's disturbing is that's supposed to be the opposite of the goal, right? It's supposed to be the opposite of the goal. The goal is for everyone to live together in harmony. And leaders are just encouraging, this horrible spiral. Well, sister, we thank you for all your input. I'd like to have you on the show again. We have to go to a break, and then we're going to have Dr. Bill Warner on there to discuss some of the Islamic background of this. But I thank you. And how can people? Do you have any contact info or website or anything you'd like to share real quick?
I just have my Facebook, and I have my Facebook page. It's called Jomana Joy. I share a lot of things about Christians and about all the messages that Christians try to write to me. But I just want to say that for all the Christians that are listening, don't be afraid. Just talk, speak out, say what's going on. Don't be afraid. Mm-hmm. I know it's not that nice to be in my own, like what I've gone through. Now I am persecuted and I have to live around different places. But we have to do something about that. We have to speak out and say something, because this is not fair. This is not fair to go through stuff like that. And I just want to say thank you so much, David Wood, for having me on your show. I really appreciate that. Thank you for your good work, and God bless you.
And thank you again, sister. And for everyone out there, I'm especially talking to Christians in America. I understand Christians not being able to speak out in the Middle East. I understand that. I understand even Christians in some rough places in places like Denmark not being ready to speak out, knowing what could happen. You Christians who are in America and you sit here and watch this and you refuse to speak out because you're worried about being called names, and so you let this thing happen. You're cowards. You need to stop it. You need to man up. You need to be men and women of faith and stand up for your persecuted brothers and sisters. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment with Dr. Bill Warner.
Have you been looking for new live shows where you can call in and tell us what's on your mind? Trinity Channel will be airing live shows starring Brother Osama on December 15th through 18th. For more information, visit us at www.trinitychannel.com. And remember, we're looking forward to hearing from viewers like you. The Big Donation Week starts December 14th through the 20th. Please be sure to join ABN and the Trinity Channel hand in hand to make a difference in the world. We will be airing live shows with multiple Christian apologetic speakers where you can call in at 248-416-1300. Stay here with us and don't change that channel. On December 18th through the 20th, Trinity Channel will be airing new live shows starring Dr. Bill Warner. For more information, visit us at www.trinitychannel.com or call us at 248-416-1300. Be sure to stay tuned so we can hear from viewers like you.
Welcome back to the Trinity Channel. I'm not smiling because when I hear stories like we just heard, it's bad. It's depressing. It's depressing that that we live in a world, especially in the West. It's been described as a world of Christian values gone mad. Right? Tolerance is a Christian value. It's a Christian principle. Tolerance gone mad leads to all kinds of problems, right? When you become so incredibly tolerant that you won't speak out against oppression and persecution and just horrible, vile teachings about women and against minorities, when you become so tolerant, and not only that, we'll become so tolerant that we'll go after people who are speaking out against the oppression, right? So, in other words, people like me or Jomana or Dr. Bill Warner, who's with us, we actually say something about the oppression, people will be so tolerant with this false, insane tolerance that they'll come after us and attack us because we dare say something about oppressed minorities. And we dare say that there are some problematic teachings in Islam that we need to talk about. We need to have an open, honest discussion because pretending they're not there and whitewashing them does not make them go away. And they have led to 14 centuries of horrible oppression, and what are we going to do about it? We're going to pass it off to the next generation, let them deal with a much worse situation than the one we're facing right now. Is that is that a Christian virtue? Is that a Christian ideal? No. Tolerance is a good idea. We disagree. We have all kinds of disagreements, but we're not going to kill each other over these disagreements. That is a good sort of tolerance. You are oppressing people, but in order to pretend that I'm tolerant, I'm not going to object to what you're doing to all these other people. That is a false, insane kind of tolerance. And that is, again, it's Christian values gone mad. You take tolerance, which is a good idea, and turn it into something which is a horrible, horrible idea. And I'd like to get a little background here from Dr. Bill Warner. Dr. Warner, can you hear me?
I can indeed. How are you doing, David?
Were you able to catch the first part of the show?
I watched the video, the YouTube video you sent me in a link.
Okay. So you have the situation of what's going on in Denmark. Now, Jomana, who's on here, said that she has Muslim friends, but she pointed out tons of stories of things going on in Denmark. And she lives in Copenhagen. She has to go into hiding in Copenhagen just because she dared object. She dared call the police when a Muslim threatened her with beheading. And so she now has to go into hiding for simply calling the police. And now, and there are tons of stories like this. What's going on here? Because there are, I have Muslim friends. Jomana has Muslim friends, and yet we have a very real problem that there is a much greater degree of oppression and bullying coming out, even in the West, among Muslim groups in Muslim-majority areas. What do you think is going on here?
Well, first off, one of the things they called her was filthy. Mm-hmm. And my thought on that, of course, was, according to Islam, as a Christian, she is filthy. Mm-hmm. The term is kafir hajjaz. I believe I pronounced that correctly. And we have all the same problems here in Nashville, Tennessee. They may call Islam is a dualistic doctrine. So on one hand, you've got verses in the Quran which speak well of Christians. Then you have other verses in the Quran which denigrate them. And so you get to pick and choose what you want. And of course, the old question is, which one's real, Bill? Well, they're both real, and they can both be applied when they need to do so. And so far as, I find one of the most egregious things about Islamic doctrine is this. Muslims can act friendly towards the kafir, but they're not really their friend in that they would ever choose the kafir over a Muslim in any sort of decision-making process. Mm-hmm. Now, people say I have Muslim friends, and then we get to the question of, how Muslim is your friend? Mm-hmm. Somehow or another, we use the word Muslim as though it means you buy all of Islam. And so I don't know your friends, David, and anyone else's friends. How are they friendly or are they friends? I'll illustrate the difference here. I can show you some friendly people by walking on with you to any used car lot here in Nashville, Tennessee. You will immediately find some very friendly people, but they're not really your friends. Mm-hmm. So and to me, this is one of the most pernicious things about Islamic doctrine. Are you really my friend or not? And so, because to the degree they actually are your friend, really and truthfully, then to that degree they're not really Islamic.
And to that extent, if they ever stood up for you as friends, they would then become targeted by actual by Muslims who take the command seriously. And you're of course referring to chapter 5, verse 51 of the Quran, which commands Muslims not to be friends with Jews and Christians. And regarding the acting friendly, that would be, this is just for people if they doubt what we're saying. Chapter 3, verse 28, of course, which says not to be friends with unbelievers, not to take unbelievers as friends in preference to believers, unless it's to guard yourselves against them. And I invite everyone, you can look up the verses, chapter 3, verse 28, chapter 5, verse 51, and go to a website, Q Tafsir, so that's QTAFSIR.com. You have the Tafsir of At-Tabari, Ibn Kathir. You have Ibn Kathir's commentary there. He's the most respected Muslim commentator of all time. Look at what he says, because he quotes Muhammad's companions on what chapter 3, verse 28 means. And it means, when it says, unless it's to guard yourselves against them, that you do not get to be friends with unbelievers, but you can act friendly towards them if you're in an area where you are not in control. Then you can pretend to be friendly in order to guard your own community, in order to guard the Muslim community. And it's exactly what we see around the world. If you go to Muslim countries, Christians are horribly oppressed. If you come to a place like the United States, Islam is all about peace and tolerance. Well, that's exactly what's laid down in the Quran. That's exactly what's laid down, and that's why Dr. Warner pointed out that you can be friendly in different situations. But I would say, see, there's a mixture. I've had genuine Muslim friends, but they're not people. They couldn't be extremely knowledgeable about Islam. In other words, there are Muslims who are sort of like Christians who go to church here and there but aren't terribly interested in it. There are Muslims who have been more influenced by Western values than they have by Islam, and so they can be friends, but they're just not following Islam. The scary thing is that even you have two kinds of Muslims who might be friendly towards you. One, you can have Muslims who are genuinely influenced by Western values and believe in peace and tolerance, and they think that that's what Islam teaches because their community tells them that that's what Islam teaches, and that's what the media says Islam teaches, and that's what all our political leaders tell them that Islam teaches, and Islam is all peaceful and tolerant. But the problem is, if they actually know what Islam really teaches, that you can't be friends, that you're just waiting for the opportunity till you can oppress them, and you're pretending to be friendly until you have the opportunity to subjugate and violently subjugate the unbeliever, they're going to do the same thing. The outward appearance is going to be the same in both cases. And so that's what's so disturbing is we just don't know. And Dr. Warner, Jomana was telling us about the situation in Denmark, and because she grew up in a Muslim majority area of Denmark, and then moved to Copenhagen, where it was still a Muslim majority area, and she's talking about how Christians are treated, young Christian children on the playgrounds, and how they're ending up with a segregated society, because if you're growing up there, you're a Christian, you don't want to stay there anymore because you're being bullied and harassed, and so you move away. But it seems like leaders are going insane by denying this, because we have statistics, right? It's not my opinion that you can go to Muslim countries and find 60, 70, 80 some percent of Muslims will support the death penalty for apostasy. We're not making that up. We have polls, right? We're not making it up if you can go to Muslim countries and find 20, 30, 40, 50 or more percent have a favorable view of Al-Qaeda, right? We're not making this up. And so when you're bringing in thousands of immigrants, and I'm not opposed to the idea of immigration. Don't think that there's no immigrants and so on. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you're bringing in thousands of people and you know that 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% of them support Al-Qaeda, or many of them would agree with the Islamic State, or many of them support the death penalty for apostasy. What are you doing? What are you thinking? And then you say, and no, when you get here, you don't have to adopt You don't have to adopt Danish culture. You don't have to adopt British culture. You don't have to adopt French culture. You maintain your own culture. Well, if that culture says you get the death penalty for apostasy, or you throw acid in a woman's face if she turns you down or something like that, if that's the culture, that's what you're bringing in. This is just horrible stuff. Dr. Warner, I'm horribly confused now. What can we do here? Because I'm talking myself to death over and over again, day after day. What can we do here?
Well, I have an idea as to what to do. And by the way, you've only mentioned two of the friendly Muslims aren't real friends. I've counted them up. I'm sort of notorious for counting. There are no less than 12 verses in the Quran that say that a Muslim is not really the friend of a kafir. Mm-hmm. And as to what to do about this, I don't think that talking to Muslims is the thing to do about this, because we need to understand I'm going to describe what is going on in Nashville, Tennessee. In Nashville, Tennessee, the ones we would need to talk to are the members of the family of Abraham, which is a religious dialogue business run by the Muslims primarily, and yet I'm going to say the left-leaning Christians are big members of this, Methodist, Presbyterian, Reformed Jews, and they have regular meetings in which they extol the virtues of each other. We have to start putting, churches have to start putting, and Christians have to start putting pressure on what I call the near enemy. Using the language of Sun Tzu in The Art of War, we have a far enemy, Islam, and we have a near enemy who are supporting Islam. They're the apologists. And in Nashville, the biggest apologist for Islam, and who would deny what has happened to this girl, and would probably even find a way to blame it on her, are actually Christians and Jews here in the city of Nashville. So the people we need to deal with are the ones who are aiding and abetting. Let me show you how else they're aiding and abetting. Here in Nashville, Tennessee, Catholic Charities imports Somalis by the plane load, and they make roughly $6,000 for everyone they bring in. Now here's a bitter irony. I happen to have had private meetings with Catholic leadership, and they're worried about Islam. But when it comes time to running Catholic Charities, which is a multi-million-dollar organization, they're more than willing to bring in more Muslims. And I, by the way, have heard the same tales from Coptic Christians about how they fear in schools, and also another kind of fear. They can't even do political protests because they're afraid their families back in Egypt will be hurt. And yet, the Jews and the Christians who belong to the family of Abraham deny everything that you and I are saying. And what do they say? Oh, we have Muslim friends, and you're a bigot and a hater. Why do I know this? Because, David, I've talked with these people. And what they've told me is this: we're going to love these Muslim immigrants and refugees so much that they will leave their ways and they will be our best friends. Bill, they've said to me personally over coffee, and people like you are the cause of these problems. It's people like you that keep the Muslims stirred up. If you loved them as much as we did, there would be no problems. They distinctly said to my face and called me a bigot and a hater, like the KKK, and that people like you and me, David, we are the problem. Mm-hmm. We are the ones who want to bring this stuff up. Because let me assure you, no one in the family of Abraham will listen to this woman's story. They wouldn't be caught dead in an interview with her, because they do not want anything that deals with the factual news about Islam. So we have Bill, go ahead.
Bill, there's a parallel between what you were just saying and what Jomana was saying earlier. She was saying that even the church leaders in Europe won't speak out against what's going on, won't say a word about what's going on, because they don't want to interfere with their dialogue with Muslims. And we have the same thing over here. The difference is, over there they will face actual legitimate persecution, right? They can be targeted. They will have, if they're in a Muslim majority area, they will be targeted. They will have their property destroyed and so on. So, and as opposed to the Middle East, where you might just get killed. So you have different ways of keeping Christians quiet. But as far as church leaders in America, the worst thing most of them would ever have to worry about is being called a name. And even they won't speak out, right? They can sit here and watch, unbelievers in, being brutally raped, by the Islamic State, or young girls by people in the UK, and for fear of being called a name, a bigot, will just not only keep silent about it, but will actively come after people like you and target you because you might cause problems and disrupt the harmony. Well, I mean, my question is, if the Muslims who are in this dialogue actually believe in harmony, why would they be opposed to us speaking out against all these atrocities? Why wouldn't they say, yes, I mean, we all need to join together and speak out against these atrocities? But what happens when groups like CARE, what happens when a group like CARE sees, that film, The Honor Diaries, and they have it shut down. They have it shut down on college campuses. There's nothing against Islam in there. They even say in the documentary that this doesn't have to do with Islam. We know it does, but they say in the documentary this is not Islam. They have Muslim women on here, and even that's going too far for CARE. You have to shut down anything remotely critical of anything that is happening in the Muslim world. And I mean, if that's the sort of dialogue that you mean, if that's the sort of dialogue that these Christian leaders are interested in, what good is it? All the dialogue does is keep people quiet while other people are being oppressed. And I mean, are we stupid here, Bill? Can we be this stupid? It almost seems like there has to be something spiritual involved, because I do not believe that people could actually be this stupid. What do you think?
I don't think it is stupidity. I think it's abject fear, which is so ironic, because Christian leaders, one of the most frequent admonitions in the New Testament is Christians are not to be afraid. And the same Christians that reject the truth that that the persecuted church will bring them, and they do, I think it's just abject fear. It is though, the thing that's most disturbing about this is that what I'm describing here in Nashville, although I'm always very careful to say I'm only talking about Nashville and Middle Tennessee, I don't know what's going on anywhere else. But isn't it amazing that even though I talk about Nashville, the most distressing thing about this, David, is that it is uniform. It is uniform. I don't know, let me address this thing of being called names. First off, it would be interesting for you and me to sit down and compare the names we've been called. We could see the guy who has the most names would be bought lunch with the other. But it would be a long list for both of us. Do you know what, David? Not a single one of those names has ever actually hurt me. And yet we find religious leaders who are supposed to be courageous, and the names do hurt them. So what kind of person are we dealing with here that says they're a follower of Christ, and yet Christ was hated? Am I wrong? Christ stirred things up. Am I wrong? He was viciously hated. And yet people who say, well, I follow Jesus today, they don't want to be hated. So I'm proud of being hated, because I tell you something I've learned in 73 years of learning. You can judge a man better by his enemies than you can his friends. And David, I am proud to have the enemies I have. And I wonder, are not Christians called upon to have enemies as well? Is it all gone down the deep, dark hole of nice? Oh, we're all nice. We're all acting nice, pretending nice. So those are some thoughts I have on the matter, but I find the uniformity that this veil of darkness, which is over all of the churches, it seems like everywhere you go. Now, let me quickly say here, I'm only condemning 90% of the churches, but I am condemning 90% of them, at least judged by what's going on here in Nashville. So I think we have to deal with the problem. To deal with Islam is we first have to deal with the Christians and their lack of backbone. There's an old-fashioned word I grew up with. You may have heard it or not. The Christian leadership no longer has any gumption. Ever heard that word? It's an old one.
Yeah, that's old school right there. Gumption. Leaders need to get some gumption out there. But yeah, you didn't catch the first part of the program, but I actually wrapped up by pointing out something that I also said here, that I understand Christian leaders in the Middle East not being able to take a huge stand because of what they'll face, and I even understand to a lesser extent, but to more of an extent than I would understand it over here. Christian leaders in Copenhagen or something like that speaking out where you would face some legitimate persecution. But for Christian leaders in the United States, where again it's just all you'd have to worry about is being called a name, I ended up calling them cowards. I ended up calling them just outright cowards. I mean, I have no idea. How do you watch the story of someone like Jomana and you know, all the other stories that she brought? How do you watch that and say, you know, in the name of tolerance, or, you know, really, as you pointed out, so that I don't get called names, I'm just going to keep quiet on it. I don't know. I don't know. Did we grow up in the wrong area of town where you just don't sit back and do nothing when that sort of thing happens? I don't know. All right. Well, we have to take a break in just a moment. Let's get to a caller real quick. We have a caller on the line. Let's take a quick call. I don't know if we'll have time to answer it, but we'll take a caller. And when we come back, I'm going to want Dr. Warner to share a little bit of Islamic history, because he specializes in this sort of thing, in that, you know, for people who say that, you know, the problem with our interactions and the reason Muslims are getting so upset is because of something we're doing. Well, if that's the case, it should be a very recent development. It should be a recent development if that's the problem. So I'm going to ask him to go through some Islamic history, because again, this is his specialty. But who do we have on the line? Floyd.
Hello?
Floyd, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Floyd. We have to go to a break in just a moment, but give us your question or your comment very quickly.
Okay, very quickly, I want to explain what's going on, because you have the same thing in science where if you watch the movie Expelled, people who believe in creationism or intelligent design are excluded completely from the scientific community. These people do not speak the language of rationality and reason. They speak a language of experience of force and destruction and the threat of death, which is Satan, by the way. So the way you have to deal with them is to speak to them in their own language. You can't reason with a person who is only interested and understands force. So when you come back from break, maybe you want to address that particular idea. You have to meet force with force. Thank you.
Now, you were getting towards. You're pointing out that there are parallels in other situations, not just in this one. And I think sort of the overarching problem is that, you know, Western society and especially America used to be. I'm a philosopher, so I'm going to use a philosophical term here in moral philosophy. Absolutists, and that's not absolute in any sort of negative sense. Absolutism in moral philosophy just means that there are certain moral absolutes, and you can appeal to that. And so we used to believe that there are absolute things that are just absolutely right and absolutely wrong, and you have to stand up for what's right, and you have to stand against what's wrong. Well, we've been just sort of blasting away the foundations of ethics and morality for the past several decades. And so I believe that America and the West are being transformed into sort of honor-shame societies, right? Where now, since we can't appeal to what's really right or really wrong, because that's just nonsensical given our culture, we have to shame people into doing the right thing, and we honor people who are doing the things that we agree with. And so that's going to apply across the board. If someone's criticizing Islam and you don't want to, you shame them into silence. And if someone's criticizing something else that you don't want them to do, or speaking out against something you don't want them to speak out against, you just shame them into silence, and you praise people who are doing what you want them to do. And we have to do that now in our culture, because we've lost the foundation of right and wrong. All right, well, we have to take a break. We're going to come back. We'll have more calls, and we'll have Dr. Warner breaking down some Islamic history for us. Be back in just a moment here on the Trinity Channel.
The Big Give Week begins December 14th through the 20th, where we can join together to launch the Trinity Channel to Europe and the Middle East through Hotbird Satellite. There will be live shows hosted by Christian apologetic speakers to help spread the gospel to all nations. Together, we can reach this goal through prayer and donations. Remember, This is the Big Give Week. The Big Donation Week starts December 14th through the 20th. Please be sure to join ABN and the Trinity Channel hand in hand to make a difference in the world. We will be airing live shows with multiple Christian apologetic speakers where you can call in at 248-416-1300. Stay here with us and don't change that channel.
Welcome back to the Trinity Channel. Dr. Warner, there are, as we pointed out a moment ago, there are people who are convinced that any problems in the Muslim world are the result of Western aggression and Western imperialism, and Muslims only, there are Muslims who hate the United States only do so because of what the United States has done. If that's the case, then we should be able to see that in history, that Muslims only became upset with us once we started doing something to them first. And how does that line up with what we find in history?
We like to think that, Islamic State is in existence because of a bad foreign policy that was started by George Bush or some other such kind of, we are causing the problem. If we were only nicer, then there would not be a problem. Well, we have a 1,400-year history of Islam, and that 1,400-year history started long before we had a foreign policy. As a matter of fact, it started before we had a nation. And this makes another point, by the way. The attitudes that we see inside of the church today, we say, well, that's due to political correctness. But unfortunately, when we look back over the history of Christianity and Islam, we find that the history of Islam and Christianity is playing out just like it is today, that unfortunately there doesn't seem to be anything new under the sun. The problem with Islamic relations with Christians, let me be very clear, starts with a man by the name of Muhammad. Mm-hmm. Muhammad was a pagan killer, he was a Jew killer, and he was a Christian killer. We need to be clear about that. So the problem with killing Christians, that is the abuse of this young Christian girl in Denmark, did not start with George Bush. The trouble with this Christian girl being harmed or threatened in Denmark started with Muhammad. Now, there's a peculiar relationship between Islam and the Christians, which is there are verses in the Quran which say, oh, the Christians are good people. As a matter of fact, there's one verse which I quoted to a rabbi who said that he thought Judaism was closer to Islam than it was to Christianity. I said, well, isn't it odd that a Quran verse says that Christians are closer to the Muslims than to the Jews? Mm-hmm. Well, of course, this rabbi, like every other minister I've ever talked to, 90% of them, he didn't know anything about that. So he found that discomforting and didn't want to talk anymore about it. Mm-hmm. So the problems with Islam go before political correctness, because when we look back over the history of the church, we find that the church, in particular the Catholic Church, which represented Christianity in the West for such a long time, never really wanted to understand Islam. We find an appalling lack of translations of Qurans for centuries, which means that no one was serious. We found that the Sirah was not translated forever. And to this day, the Hadith have never been translated by a kafir. We're using translations by Muslims. So the history of ignorance of the church and Islam goes back 1,400 years. There's always been something about Islam that Christianity did not want to engage. But the persecution of the Muslims against the Christians has a long history. I find it ironic that here in Nashville, Tennessee, which calls itself the Buckle on the Bible Belt, I think it still does, I'm not sure, the biggest church school in this city teaches nothing about the history of the church and Islam. Mm-hmm. So far as this large, supposedly good university is, the problem between Christians and Muslims started with George Bush. The university doesn't teach anything about it, and this is an old history, unfortunately. So the problems with Islam started with Muhammad. They've existed for 1,400 years. How did Turkey become Muslim? It didn't become because there were some imams wandering through Turkey preaching dawah about the beauty of the Sunnah and the Quran. It came at the edge of a sword. How did North Africa become Christian, go from Christian to being Muslim? Well, it didn't happen once again by dawah, by the way, is the preaching of Islam. If it were Christianity, we would say preaching the gospel. So Egypt was originally Coptic Christian, and now today it's only 10%. So we have all, and the Middle East, my goodness gracious. In the Middle East, by the way, last year, 120,000 Christians died. This is one figure. But this is old news because, you know, I've met Christians who didn't know that Iraq used to be Christian. I've met Christians who didn't know that Lebanon, they didn't even know that the Middle East used to be Christian. Mm-hmm. I'm astounded at how little Christians know about this history, and so they think it all starts with today. But what we're looking at here is a problem that started 1,400 years ago, and we're looking at the response of a church which has always wanted to push it away and not want to deal with it. And I think the reason for this is, I'm going to give a little bit of theology here, is that the Quran is a diatribe about the Trinity. It goes on and on and on about the Trinity and about how the Trinity is not the right approach to God. So what has happened here is that there is a theology in the Quran, not just a political doctrine, but a theology, and neither Christian or Jew wants to run headlong into this theology, which is discouraging to me, because I'm a big advocate of critical thought and fact-based reasoning. And yet what we find is, I love what you said about we are being changed into an honor and shame society. Because let me tell you something, critical thought gets no respect in the study of Islam. Mm-hmm. You would think that a person who's done a technical analysis of Islamic text would be invited to, say, the large Christian university to say, well, let's have a seminar, let's talk about this. But let me tell you something, that the university, which is a Christian university and a large and prosperous one, they have no room for critical thought. No room for critical thought at all. And then I'll give you one last indication of where we stand between the church and Islam. At this university, the head of the Bible department wrote in a book that he would never say that Christianity is a better religion than Islam. I mean, David, what do you say to a man who heads a Bible department who will say this? Did I mention to you he's never read the Sirah or the Hadith and hasn't really read all of the Quran?
Well, those are the best experts as far as we're concerned in the West. Those are the experts you want, right? The people who've never studied anything remotely having to do with Islam. Those are the experts. And people like you who've been all over the sources and compiled tons of data. You're the ones we can't trust on this issue.
It's true. And by the way, he says in a high-pitched voice, it doesn't, this ignorance, although I'm hammering on the church here, and for a good reason. Let me tell you, the Republican governor of the state of Tennessee issued a direct order that the law enforcement in Tennessee could only be trained by the Muslim Brotherhood. So, again, here's a person, I have enormous knowledge of the history of jihad. I have enormous knowledge of the doctrine of jihad. I've written books on it. But can I be trusted to deal with law enforcement? Did I mention I grew up in Tennessee? Mm-hmm. So it's no one wants to hear the facts. And the reason they don't want to hear the facts, David, I had a guy tell me this. He was a Christian. We were having coffee. He says, Bill, the trouble with people like you is it's like you're talking to this man who has a wife. And the wife is beautiful and wealthy. But you happen to know she's sleeping around on him. He doesn't want to know this because then he would have to do something. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the pushback, David, is that they see that the Muslims want total war and we want worry, not war. And so if they listen to me and they listen to you, now then they have a problem they need to do something about. Mm-hmm. Because let me tell you something, the average minister here is in the middle of Tennessee, their first concern is not what to do about Islam. Their first concern, and I ain't making this up, is the IRS. And their 50 is the favorite Bible verse here in Tennessee is 501c3. Mm-hmm. Yep. That's what they worry about.
And the problem with ignoring it is, you know, we've talked about, you know, there are people who are being horribly oppressed and persecuted around the world, and that's a problem that, if left unchecked, it's not going to go away. It's not even going to stay the same. It's going to get worse. It's going to get much, much worse. So when we pretend that there's no problem, when we try to cover up what's going on, it's not. It would be bad enough just ignoring the people who are being oppressed and persecuted, but we're doing this to our children and our children's children and our children's children's children. We're saying we're too cowardly to actually confront and do something about this problem, so we're going to leave our descendants with a much worse problem and let them deal with it and hope that they don't follow in our footsteps of just complete cowardice, and that they have some gumption. It's the second time I've used that word in my entire life, that they've got some gumption to actually, stand up for what's right. But oh boy, I hope my kids do not end up like the people I see around them in the world. And it's just, I don't know, it's horrifying. It's depressing. What do we do?
By the way, David, I'm giving a talk tomorrow to a great many Tea Party, conservative, and Christian leaders, and what I'm going to tell them is that what they want to, the title of the talk is How to Defeat Islam, is that as a person who's been on top of this, I'm going to announce to the assembled people tomorrow that Islam in Tennessee has moved from stage 1 cancer to stage 2. So while they think that big smiles and nice attitudes is going to change things, it is changing, David, but it is changing in totally the wrong direction. Because the reason I say it's stage 2 here now is that CARE is now setting up an office here. If you want to dial the Muslim Brotherhood in Nashville, there's somebody who's a receptionist who will pick up the phone, okay? But if you want to dial the counter-jihad movement, unless you know my cell movement, we don't have a receptionist. We don't have a budget. So the way it's going is that in Tennessee it is progressing very rapidly. That instead of individual Muslims who are a problem, we now have a systemic problem. So that's the reason I say we're moving from stage 1 individuals to stage 2, is we now have an infection of the body politic that is systemic and exceedingly well funded. And that's not the problem. That's not the problem. The problem is there's no one to oppose them, except it's interesting. Here in Tennessee, you can put the whole counter-jihad squad in a van. So imagine what if we had 1,000 of us. We could kick some serious backside, David. That's the other thing that drives me nuts. This is winnable if you have some gumption.
Yeah, it's on the one hand, it's really depressing. It's horribly depressing, and you wonder, what am I doing here? We have a world that just doesn't want to listen. We have a society that just doesn't want to listen. Our politicians are some of the biggest morons that have ever walked the planet, and just complete cowards. Not across the board, but for the most part, the media will do anything they can to whitewash Islam. And you think, what can we do against that sort of situation? How can we possibly stand up against politicians, the media? The power is all on the other side, but that's not true. If we just winning one mind at a time, right? If you eventually reach a critical mass of informed people, they're not going to put up with it anymore, right? At the end of the day, this is still a democracy. If enough people catch on and realize what's going on, they will elect leaders who have caught on. And, at the end of the day, the mainstream media, those are businesses. If they start losing viewers because people are sick of being lied to, they have to adapt or they will die out. And other networks that are telling the truth will catch on. So we don't have to have all the political power or all the news network power. If we do what we're doing and enough people start doing it, then people will catch on, more people will be informed, and we can actually change some things. All right, well, we have only about 15 minutes left. We have a couple of callers. Let's try getting to a couple of callers. Who do we have on the line?
Dave?
Yeah.
Hey, good evening, Dave. My name's Bruce, and I think you're doing a fantastic job. Keep your head up, keep your shoulders back. You're doing great, brother.
Nice.
I want to, if I can, I really appreciate all the words that you guys are saying, and I'd just like to share with you, if I could, out of our good book, the Bible, and this is the good old-fashioned King James Bible, out of St. Mark there under chapter 13, and I'd like to just go to I'd like to go to verse 9 if I could, and if you don't mind, can I read that? Because this is
go
Jesus.
for it. Not going to block the Bible. Go ahead.
Thank you. But take heed to yourselves, for they shall deliver you up to councils, and in the synagogues ye shall be beaten. You shall be brought before rulers, kings, for my name's sake, for a testimony against them. And when we go up to the same chapter 13 under verse 12, for the Muslims and the Islamic betrayal of Christians who have converted from Muslim and Mohammedanism into Christianity. Now the brother shall betray the brother to death, and the father and the son, and the children shall rise up against their parents. They shall cause them to be put to death. Ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. Now that's the words of our Lord Jesus Christ to the disciples on the Mount of Olives. And I think that in our guidance between Muslims and Christians, Catholicism, Buddhism, and Hinduism, all of the Christianities, if you want to say the higher power of belief in believers, all of us, we all acknowledge that we have a creator. We don't all acknowledge that the Messiah was Lord Jesus Christ. But for the elect of the earth that know for the truth of the matter that he was in fact the Son of God, it's easy to comprehend the words in the Bible because it clearly lays it out, and I just wanted to share that with you. And brother, I thank you so much, and I do urge viewers on this program, you can support this program. It is a very good support, and I thank you so much, sir. You have a blessed evening.
Thank you, brother, and I agree with him that anybody out there who wants to see programs like this continue, or if you're like me and you'd like to see more programs, I'd like to see a nightly, you know what I would like to see more than anything else in the world, apart from, justice and, things like that. I'd love to see a nightly program like from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock every night where any ridiculous thing that was said on CNN or any ridiculous thing that was said on ABC about Islam, any news stories that people can send it to us right when it comes out, and it gets a response that night. It gets a response, and start holding people accountable, start holding networks accountable. But can't actually do that now with the state of things here at the Trinity Channel. So please support the Trinity Channel if you can, because we'd like to see those sorts of things happen. We'd like to see Trinity Channel launched in Europe and across the Middle East. So that's what we'd like to see. We want to get the information out there. But brother, I certainly agree with you. I mean, when you read the Bible, Christians, you're going to be persecuted. You're going to be hated. They're going to kill you. And now we get to the message of Christianity today. Your goal is to be liked. And if you just do what you're supposed to do and live like a good Christian who never offends or bothers anybody, everyone will like you. Just as the goal of Christianity has always said. What planet are you living on? That is the goal of Christianity. I don't know. But, I see we've got someone, Margaret. We have a caller, Margaret, on the line.
Hi, Pastor. God bless you for this program. Excellent, great work. And
hey,
Dr. Warner, too. To be honest, the world has to wake up to themselves, particularly the Western world, to the danger of Islam. Now, when you hear Danish government allowing or accepting the minority Islam to practice, Muslims to practice their own culture, which is based fully on their religion, are they allowing the marriage of the young girls at age of 6? Where would they stand in terms of pedophilia? That is considered pedophilia in the Western society. How are they going to apply the legislation in terms of pedophilia, sentencing people that they are caught with pedophilia behavior? So this is contradictory to the Western society's law. So we are really in danger if that goes around and all the Western society allows such idea of allowing Muslims to practice their culture. God help us in these days. And also one more thing I would like to share, that isn't that we're coming to the time where the Antichrist is revealing himself through allowing Islam to penetrate through the Western society's mentality by accepting them, or because they're human. Yes, they are, but we should accept them as human, but not their religion. So it's two different things. God bless you. And I would urge everyone who listens to such program, please support this program to stay on air, because it's awakening and alarming to let everyone be aware of Islam, what's going on of the Islamic religion. And God bless you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sister. And you pointed out a couple of things. One, you drew attention to the end times. I don't know much about end times doctrine, but I pointed out earlier in the program with Dr. Warner, I said it almost seems like there has to be something spiritual going on here, because just people cannot be this stupid, right? I mean, if you can figure out 2 + 2 = 4, you can figure out the Quran lays down a pattern that when you're in the minority, you pretend to be peaceful. When you form a majority, you subjugate everyone around you. That's been going on for 14 centuries. You can see that same pattern in the life of Muhammad, in the Quran, in the Sirah, in the Tafsir, in the Hadith for 14 centuries, and you can see it all around you wherever you go in the world. You can't be this stupid. You can't be stupid enough to miss this, and yet almost everyone misses it. And so it seems like, you know, again, if you can figure out 2 + 2 = 4, you can understand this. But people just don't understand it. So there seems to be something very disturbing at work. Now, as for telling Muslims, hey, you know, we're going to have multiculturalism, you adopt your own culture. We brought up, you know, some of the things like, you know, lots of Muslims in countries believe in killing apostates, believe in, you know, there should be some harsh penalties, if not the death penalty, for any kind of criticism of Muhammad. So Muslims believe a lot of these things, and then they come. So if we don't say, hey, we need to lay some ground rules down about the culture you're in now, we're going to have some problems. But you are drawing attention to things like, you know, marriage and underage girls, and they're, you know, in areas where you know, Islam is spreading, and you have a majority of Muslims. Things are actually going on where a Muslim will understand he can't marry this 10 or 11-year-old girl according to the country's laws, but he'll go to an Islamic cleric to perform the marriage. And we see the same thing with polygamy. I actually know, I know a girl and a family where there's a Muslim. He had a wife. He tells this Western girl, hey, I'm going to leave my wife and I'm going to marry you. And so she starts dating him. He gets her pregnant, and once she is pregnant, then he says, actually, I'm not leaving my other wife. You're going to be my second wife. We're going to get an Islamic marriage. And so you'll be my other wife, and if you don't, I will never support this child. And she agrees, right? She agrees. She wants to be supported. She wants her child to be supported. So she agreed to take that second spot, the second wife spot. But that's in the United States of America. That's in the United States. That's here in Michigan, right? So this sort of thing is going on where you can get around the rules of Western society. You can get around the rules of Western society by just doing things the Islamic way and not informing the government. And you see this a lot more in Europe, where a man will have three or four Muslim wives. He will have all of them. He will have all of them, or at least all but one, on welfare, because they're listed officially as single mothers, but they're all Islamically married to this one man, and so he has all of them collecting state benefits. And it's actually a sad scenario, because Muslims are saying that it's easier to have 3 or 4 wives by coming to Europe than it is in the Middle East, where you have to be wealthy enough. But if you go to Europe, you can marry multiple wives, and they'll all be paid for. The government will pay for them for you. So it's not just that we're allowing certain things; it's that we're helping it. We're aiding and abetting the practices by not taking a stand against some of these things. Dr. Warner, we have only about 3 minutes left. What are your concluding thoughts on all of this?
I'd like to address something you just said about the polygamy. In Europe, the social workers who know about such polygamy are forbidden to report it or talk about it. And I'd be willing to say that the same thing is happening here in America. The problem is not that Islam is so strong. The problem is that we are so afraid, so weak, so ignorant, and we don't want to do anything about it. Islam is not the problem. Our society is the problem because these things can be easily taken care of. As an example, I've mentioned the family of Abraham and its evil effects here in Nashville. There's actually, if we could get some Christians together who are warriors, the key elements of this family of Abraham group, there's only about a dozen of them. So if we had social pressure and whatnot from a large quantity of Christians against these people, we could pressure the chief supporters of Islam to fold up their tent. But the problem is, we can't get people here in Tennessee, Christians who say they're bold and brave, to take on any task like this. I return to my theme. Islam is not the problem. We are the problem. We will not shoulder the burden that we've been given. We've had a problem that's been kicked down the road for centuries. It is our time to solve it. We need to shoulder the burden. This is a doable war, and it is war. Let us be clear here. This is not an annoyance. This is not a worry. This is a civilizational war that we can win if we say we want to fight. But it means that first we have to fight those who are closest to us. We will defeat Islam by defeating their supporters, the apologists. So that's sort of my summary of it, David.
Thank you, Dr. Warner. For those of you out there who are watching, there are a lot of people who agree with us in sort of theory, but who will not speak out because they'll get in trouble over it. I know lots of Christian apologists who agree with me behind the scenes, will even send me articles and say, hey, David, post this on your website, but won't say much in public because they can't, because it will cause problems for their job, it will cause problems for their ministry, and so on. Those of you who are watching, some people have to take a stand so that others will take a stand, right? And so we're taking a stand here. We invite you to take a stand, and just understand ahead of time, you're going to be called names. You might be threatened with death. You will have some problems. You will be criticized. You will be called bigot and hate monger and so on. But you need to live with that. You need to do it anyway because it's the right thing. We cannot sit back and watch the horrible oppression that's going on in the world and do nothing out of fear. I'm telling you, as a Christian, you are supposed to be courageous. You are supposed to be fearless. You are supposed to trust. You are supposed to fear one, and you're not supposed to fear the ones around you. And so you need to take a stand, do the right thing, and at the end of the day, other people will see that, and other people will take a stand. That's how it has to happen. Right now, it has to happen one at a time, one person at a time. But in the future, you will see many more standing. I hope that's the case. Maybe I'm an optimist here, but I believe that we can do something about this. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Warner. Thank you, our sister, for calling in and the wonderful words you shared. And we'll see you all in half an hour, where we're going to have a former Muslim who's now an atheist share her story about leaving Islam. See you in half an hour here on the Trinity Channel.